Towboat by Rev Black Rage. My name is Johnny Marcus Dubois. I'm a deckhand on a towboat. A towboat is a boat designed to push barges up and down rivers. Yes, I understand the irony of calling a boat designed to push barges up and down intercoastal waterways a towboat. Rarely do we actually tow anything. But nobody asked me my thoughts on the subject when they named the damn things. But I'm not here to tell you about the silliness of intercoastal marine watercraft naming convention. No. So think of the intercoastal waterways as roads. The big ones are highways, the little ones are city roads. The ones that are just big enough for a barge are your backcountry 2-lane roads that see maybe 5 cars a week. The water takes us to some places that most people won't ever see, let alone know about. Some real backwoods, middle of nowhere swamp folk type places. I was doing a 30-day hitch for a larger towboat company by the name of Kirby Inland Marine. We were back in the middle of nowhere, taking a less often used waterway, pushing an LPG barge to some little chemical plant out on the ass end of civilized creation. We were 15 days into this contract and God knows how far away from home in Louisiana, which is where we operate out of. The glorified ditch we were pushing down was completely natural. No man's hand ever touched this thing. It flowed around bends in the river and doubled back on itself from time to time. It had sandbars which were hidden just under the water. The occasional boat wreck you had to dodge, depending on how deep the water was. It was a real chaotic little strip of water. It was probably a full-time job for the captain to keep us from chasing frogs. And that's what the old-timers call running aground. Part of my job as a deckhand is to walk the barge every so often to make sure it's in good shape. It's a nice little escape from the confines of the boat. Sometimes if I'm not busy with cleaning, maintaining, or on watch, I'll set up a folding chair at the front of the barge and just hang out, watching the shoreline cruise past. My form of meditation, I suppose. Well, that night I was walking up along the starboard side of the barge. I was lost in thought, thinking about what I'd be doing with the cash I was building up on this hitch. Truck needed new transmission. Wife was in dire need of a date night. Kids wanted one of them Xboxes. I had plenty of things to sink my money into. I was just about to decide on where I was taking Missy, my wife, out to dinner, when it drifted out of the trees on the edge of the waterway, riding my way on the wind. At first I could have sworn I imagined it. The barge splitting the water, wind rushing past my ears, and the twin turbo diesels that pushed the boat were all loud. But I listened a little harder, and there was again. Sounded like a woman screaming in some language I'd never heard. Could have been Greek or Mandarin Chinese for all I knew. The screams were broken up by the occasional laughter. I sat for a moment trying to pin down where it came from. If it was a serious thing. Could have been some species of animal or another. Could have been some backwoods folk having a party. Could have been a lot of things. So I wasn't exactly trepidatious, but I did want to know where it was coming from. The screams sounded like the sort you might hear out of a crazy person. The laughs had the same sort of manic intensity to them. Something in the back of my soul told me to leave it alone, but the front part of my brain was just too curious to listen. I broke out my flashlight and lit up the trees to one side of the river. It was one of those ridiculously bright LED lights, the kind that turn the circular beam into midday. The screams and laughs instantly ceased. Nobody there. I shifted the beam of the light to the opposite bank. Nothing. Made me think it might have been an animal. An animal and my own imagination teaming up to mess with me.
What are you looking for?
The radio clip to my life vest crackled alive, giving me a fright and scaring 7 shades of shit out of me. It was Ronnie, the pilot. He drove the boat when the captain was on sleep time. He'd seen me lining up the riverbanks with my work light from his vantage point in the pilot house. I turned and looked up at him. I couldn't see the man as he was tucked away safely behind the big turned windows of the pilot house, but I knew he was there. Just like whatever was making the racket must have known I was there. "Nothing, boss," I responded over the radio. I briefly thought about mentioning the voice, but quickly dismissed it. It could have been anything. "Just chasing ghosts, I guess."
You be careful chasing them ghosts,"
Ronnie said cryptically over the radio. He was a true son of a Katie, and half the time I couldn't follow the coon-ass gibberish that came out of his mouth. So he must have slowed that Cajun-flavored English down, just especially for me, so I could understand him. Side note, I am cleaning up his accented Cajun bastard Anglo-French, because if I tried to write his speech down word for word and sound for sound, it would read as unintelligible.
"There's them ghosts come chasing you back sometime,"
he went on. "I'll keep that in mind, boss man," I said, giving the shoreline one last look around. I figured I'd never see what made those screams, nor those laughs. Might have been an animal. Probably was. Either way, it wasn't worth my time. I walked back up the barge to the boat, doing my best to forget that the screams had been made up of words. Because they wouldn't have been from an animal if they were made up of words, now would they? I was sitting at the dining table of the galley, eating a leftover brisket sandwich when a guy named Hare came over the radio. He was the other deckhand on watch with me. Big-ass native Hawaiian dude. We would have called him Maui, except he was bald as a bowling ball, so we called him Hare, because that's how things work.
"Body in the water!"
He cracked it out of my shoulder mag, immediately dropped my sandwich and ran through the outer hatch. Hare was standing on the aft side of the stern dock, both hands on his head. His body language could be described as tense. "Who's in the water?" I asked, looking in the direction we had just come from. It was dark, and all I could see was the white froth from our wake. Pulled out my flashlight and aimed it back up the river, searching for a body. "Dunno, nephew," he said. His normally friendly rumble of a voice was tight with concern. "Look like a woman, but they face down." "Shit," was the only response I could muster. "Honey, brother," Hare said into his radio, more tension bleeding into his words. "You gotta slow this thing down, so I can put the boat into the water." A few heartbeats passed and seemed to stretch on forever. I kept expecting to feel the engines ease down and idle as the boat glided to a stop. They never did, though. The boat just kept chugging along.
"No,"
Ronnie finally said. "No?" Hare said aloud. He looked over at me. I returned his look with a shrug. He raised his radio to his face and spoke back to Ronnie. "Somebody in the water, they might need us, brother. We gotta do something."
"Ain't nobody or nothing in that water that need for our help."
Ronnie's voice crackled back again, soaked in that Cajun crypticality.
"I know there's water here. You ain't seen nobody."
"Bullshit!" Hare yelled into the radio, his native accent peeking out from behind his words, as it had a tendency to do when he was agitated.
"No."
Ronnie crackled angrily over the radio.
"I tell you what's bullshit. A damn decade come scream back at a pilot. You want to swim back to Homer? Company no gonna give you an Uber if your ass get run off."
Hare didn't say anything back. He just stared at his radio in surprise. Ronnie wasn't normally so fiery. He looked up at me again. All I could do was shrug. I said with trepidation in my voice. Hare was a good dude. He was also a good-sized dude. One who was under a little strain, too. I was gonna have to wear kid gloves on this one. He may have had a lot of years on me, but I still wouldn't have wanted to catch one of his giant old man hands upside my head. "Are you sure you saw a body?" His eyes narrowed at me, his features tightened into a scowl. I nervously swallowed. I stood up straight, though. It was a fair question. All kinds of trash and garbage in the water. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of something, and it ain't what you think it is. I was bracing for a hit, but all he did was bring his radio back to his lips. "Why are we doing nothing, Ronnie? Make it make sense, brother," was all he said. There was a loaded moment before Ronnie responded.
"Brother, I've been in these waters more than a time or two.
Ronnie drawled cryptically out of the radio.
I never seen nothing like this before in this particular bayou. But I seen this before. Now you trust me. Ain't nothing in that water need for our help.
His eyes widened slightly. He didn't speak for a moment. His head tilted slightly to each side. It was like I was watching him physically mull it over. Okay, brother. Well, you're gonna have to tell me what this is.
I will. We're gonna have to wait. Let me worry about getting us out of this place. 'Cause I got a feeling we need to get out here. Now keep your mind at ease. And whatever happens, you stay on the boat. So keep your mind at ease and get back to work. I think the ropes on the barge need to be straightened out a little. Be looking sloppy.
Well, fuck, I said out loud. Not into the radio, of course. Ronnie had just distributed some mic work to us, most likely to take our minds off the body he had claimed to have seen. At least we weren't doing something tedious like polishing the exhaust stacks. That sort of extended job was the sort that would drive a man to drink. I was standing next to the big Hawaiian on the boat, or front of the barge. We'd straightened our ropes, emptied the trash can that rode on the bow, straightened up the various fittings that sat on the manifest of the bow, where hoses connected the docks for loading and unloading. We were killing time till the shift change, and we had worked in silence mostly, our minds heavy with the thoughts of the evening's transpires. You know, I ventured out loud, I heard something earlier. He had dropped the coil of the N2 hose that he was holding in the line of the reducer fittings. What you heard, nephew? He asked, standing up straight and giving me a curious look. I ain't too sure. Mostly sounded like a woman screaming and laughing. I think they might have been a couple of song dogs yapping at each other, 'cause as soon as I lit up the trees, they hushed. The big man cast his gaze out of the banks of the bayou. He ran a hand over his bald head. I briefly wondered if he was naturally bald, or if he shaved his head. His eyes looked troubled, like he had a lot going on behind them. Something that was picking at his soul. There ain't no coyotes in this one, brother. I don't think they range into this part of the state. He took a few steps towards the edge of the barge, his fists found perched on his hips. He appeared to be lost in thought. I feel like we got eyes on us. Felt that way since we got in this ditch. He turned at the waist and stared back at me. Ronnie got his windows open. He said and inclined his head towards the pilot house. If you heard it, he heard it. Something going on. Something he don't want to say. Dude, I think it was just a couple of lost song dogs. I think you may have seen some trash in the water. You remember that time Cat Daddy? Cat Daddy was a tankerman who worked out of Houston. He was a bit of a minor celebrity in the local industry. Thought he saw a body float past the barge, so he hopped in the water and ended up pulling out a CPR dummy. I'm not saying you didn't see a body. It just might have been something else, you know? He turned back to me. His eyes were wide set in anger, being questioned. I know what I see. I was on the water right after Katrina. I see a few bodies in the water. I know what that looks like. I honestly had no response to that. I still wanted to tell him of my doubts, but there was no way I could respond to that without looking like the world's biggest asshole. I was in one hell of an awkward spot, so I figured that humoring the old man might be my best bet. Alright, Hale. I guess you might. But by now that body's gone. Not much we can do for him now anyway. Maybe. Hale conceded. But that don't sit right with me. Leave that body behind like that. Somebody out there. Want to know where the people at. I looked down at the rope in my hands. I didn't know what to say to that. I figured him for right. If Missy or one of my kids had gone missing and died somewhere, I'd want to know. I would hope some kindly stranger could put some closure on that table for me. I was just about to tell Hare the same thought. I looked back up at him. I was about to open my mouth and suggest we go to the pilot house, maybe talk some sense to Ronnie, even if Hare had seen nothing. He was still right. The right thing to do would at least go have a look. But he wasn't looking at me. He was staring off the edge of the barge, like he could see in the dark, like the water cutting past either side of the barge was casting an enchantment on him. I watched him for a moment. His fists were clenched at his sides. I realized he was whispering something, the same word over and over again. No, 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 no. Look on his face was horrified if I had to describe it. I came around his side. I waved my hand in front of his face, trying to break whatever spell he was under. He jumped and looked at me. He looked confused. He turned his head back towards the edge of the barge. He took a step towards the water. "Here," I said in a tone of voice that was more of a question than anything. "Nephew," he finally said, his voice sounding small, scared even. "I know you hear that, nephew." I turned my head, casting an ear to the night sky, trying to hear anything that would have set the big man off, to put that kind of fear into him. I tried to pierce the darkness with my eyes, but my vision wouldn't even reach the shore. I noticed it had gotten darker, like the barge had pushed right into an underground tunnel. I looked up and realized the stars weren't even twinkling down on me. The moon had taken a vacation, because all that was left of the night sky was a shade of bluish black just this side of eternal. "What the fuck?" I whispered. The night sky had disappeared, and I hadn't even been paying enough attention to watch it go. I didn't hear what Hare was hearing, though. He must have left with the stars. My breath started coming shallow. I could feel a knot of anxiety tighten up in my chest. Where did the stars go? I gasped out, asking not only Hare but the universe at large. "Don't know, nephew," Hare said, a great strain flavor in his words, like he was in anguish. "I can't go leave that baby in the water." "What?" I asked. "What baby is he talking about?" Both of our radios crackled alive. The radio static sounded like furious lightning in the near-dead quiet.
"Boys,"
Ronnie boomed over the small speaker.
"you get to that boat, they ain't gonna be no good out there. I seen this thing. You get to the boat, go get sleep time, I'll get us out of here."
Hare turned and looked up at the pilot house, back on the other end of the barge. It almost looked foreboding with the big black windows, like the eyes of a massive dead beast glaring down at us from the other side of the barge. I realized I was shaking. The hair on the back of my neck was standing. I was terrified. I don't think I could have moved from that spot if I tried. Hare looked back down at me. "Nephew, Johnny, I can't let that baby stay in the water. I hear him scream. I hear him scream for me, come to get him." I still heard nothing. It felt like I needed to tell Hare that. Hare, Norman. I use his real name, I guess because it feels like that might get through to him. There ain't no baby man. I can't hear nothing. "You think I don't know that?" He screamed at me. I noticed now that tears were streaming down his face. He was crying. "You think I don't know there ain't nothing for me in that water?" What the fuck is going on? I thought. He started turning out his pockets like he didn't want to get his wallet wet. He looked like a man getting ready to jump off a bridge. He was sobbing as he did so. I put a hand on his massive shoulder. He paused for a second. His shoulders shook. "I don't want to go. Don't want to go. Don't want to go." I could hear him repeating to himself between sobs, something like he was on the verge of hyperventilating. "Well, shit. Don't go then," was all I could come up with on the spot. I don't think it mattered, though. Hare shook his head and stood up straight. "No choice," Hare whispered, his words soaked in breathless terror. "That baby need me. Got to help." He took one more slow step forward, his massive boot ringing off the metal deck of the barge, with all the finality of a church bell ringing across a graveyard. "No," I said. "Fuck that." I wrapped both hands around his arm, doing my best to keep him from taking another step. I strained with every muscle I had. I planted my feet and pulled back as hard as I could, throwing my weight backwards. I wasn't going to let Norman go into the water if that was the last thing I did. I grunted as I tried to shift the big Hawaiian's weight. "You ain't going in that water," I said with some bass in my voice. He responded by taking another step and pulling me along with him. We were now about 2 steps from the edge of the barge. Hare looked down at me. "Let go, Johnny." His words were small, like a child's. I noticed that there were tears wetting his cheeks. "It's not for me to decide anymore. That baby need me." "Fuck that baby!" I screamed at him, throwing every last bit of effort I had in pulling him back. Every ounce of effort in that 150-pound frame of mine could give. He took another step, closer to the edge. At this point, another step would send him tumbling over the edge of the barge to that cold black water. No telling who or what would find him down there, but everything in me said I needed to try and keep him from finding out. But he was just such a big man. It felt like I was trying to shift a statue from its pedestal. He wouldn't budge. In a last-ditch effort, I reared back and kicked the ever-loving shit out of the back of his knee. The idea was that he would fall backwards and away from the edge. He didn't even react. Didn't buckle. Didn't break. "Hare!" I screamed. My voice was probably nothing but a hot panic at that point. "You can't go in there, man!" He looked down at me and shook his head. A calmness seemed to descend over him, like he had made peace with what was happening. He didn't say anything, just smiled through his tears as if to say, "Nothing for it, brother." Without a word, he swung his balled-up fist at me, driving into my stomach. All the breath in my lungs burst out of my mouth at once. I fell to my knees. My dinner felt like I was making a break for it. Norman lifted his foot to take that last step over the side. "No!" I screamed and tried to scramble forward to the non-skid surface of the barge. My knees screamed in agony as they scraped across the rough deck. I reached out with both hands, grabbing for any part of hair I could grab a hold on. My fingers touched his calf. But that was all they did. I couldn't hope to get a grip on him. Without a word, Hare took that last step off the barge. Over the side went Norman Ronald Akue. I screamed after him. Something in my voice broke. My scream went harsh. I crawled to the edge, hoping to see Hare doggy paddling for the shore. Instead, I looked down into a black void. I couldn't even see the water. It was just black, stretching down into forever. No sign of Hare, like the black had swallowed him up. With nothing but a futile wail of a cry, I collapsed onto my stomach. Tears fell from my eyes, falling off into the dark. The laughing decided to make itself heard again. It seemed to come from all directions, a hellacious cacophony slamming into my eardrums. It hurt like holy hell. Felt like it was trying to tear my brain in half. I curled into a ball and slammed my hands over my ears. I screwed my eyes shut. I didn't want to see what was laughing. I didn't want to see what had taken Hare. It got louder and louder until it wasn't a laugh anymore. It was just a bloody murder scream. It felt like it was coming from just in front of my closed eyes. I swore I felt warm air on my face, like something was breathing on my closed eyes. There wasn't a force on this earth that would have been able to make me open my eyes at that point. But just as quick as it begun, it was gone. Like it had gotten what it wanted, it had no reason to stick around. An eternity went by before it felt safe to open my eyes again. I half expected to see the gaping maw of some monster unworthy of hell and too ungodly for this world. Nothing. Not a thing. I rolled over onto my back. The stars twinkled down on me. The black was gone, it seemed, and the sky was back. I lay there for a moment trying to take in what had just happened. My breath was quick and shallow as the fear still burned through my veins. Tears were still spilling from my eyes.
I guess.
A voice crackled out of my radio.
I guess I couldn't get us out of here in time.